Hey guys, it's Hexical here, and today we're going to be talking about and going over the GMMK Pro. Before we get into this, I do want to mention that I do have a Discord channel that we talk about keyboards, tech, and other things, so make sure to check that out if you're interested in something like that. Now that that's over with, let's go ahead and get into this build and the unboxing. On the first unboxing, I was honestly really impressed with the quality of this product. The top foam has their nice little logo on it, and it has their Ascended motif on the top box. Taking off the top foam, the first thing you're going to be seeing is this holographic logo sticker of Glorious's. Underneath that, we have the keyboard and the PCB and the whole kit pretty much. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Next up, we have the screws. These are just some extra screws in case you lose some, which is always nice to see. They also provide you with some extra gasket mounts in case something gets damaged during shipping or anything else. And the final parts in the box are this plastic keycap puller, this metal switch puller, and then this braided USB-C cable that comes with the keyboard. Now that we've unboxed the keyboard, let's go ahead and talk about the kit itself. This right here is a 75% kit, and the whole body's made out of aluminum, so when I say it's heavy, I mean it is super heavy. Comparing the weight to my KBD67 Lite, which you can find a build video in the top right, this thing is honestly like a rock. A few other features of this keyboard is a gasket mounted design, a rotary knob, per key RGB lighting, included goat stabilizers, and finally a 5-pin hot swap PCB. Now that we've gone over the board a little bit, let's talk about the parts I'm going to be using. The first part we're going to talk about is this polycarbonate plate from Glorious. This gives the keyboard a more flexible feel, as you can see from the plate bending right here. I will mention that their old runs of these plates had fitment issues, but mine is perfectly fine and they've said that they fixed it. Next up, we have the stabilizers. Now the GMMK Pro does come with stabilizers, but I wasn't a huge fan of them. These are Durock V2 screw-in stabilizers, and I've already pre-lubed and pre-clipped them, so they're completely modified. If you want a whole tutorial on that, check out my RK61 video in the top right where I go over this process. I'm also going to be using the stabilizer foam from KBD fans just because I had extra and I wanted to use it up. The keycaps we're going to be using is this childhood set from KBD fans. I've actually had this set for quite some time, and it used to be on my RK61, but I decided to throw this on my GMMK Pro. I specifically chose this set because I'm really in love with this colorway as it matches my whole setup, and I think it'll look really nice on the silver version of the GMMK. For my switches, I decided to go with the Prince switches from Prevail Key Co. This is a tactile switch with a polymer bottom housing, a 69-gram extended gold-plated spring, a palm stem, and a polycarbonate upper housing. I've been using these for a little while, and I've honestly started to love how they feel and sound. Now that we've gone over the parts of what I'm going to be using for my GMMK Pro, it's time to disassemble this keyboard. First thing you're going to want to do is flip the keyboard over and then go ahead and locate all the screws on the back. I'll be pointing them out right here. Once you do that, all that you have to do is grab your screwdriver and start hacking away at it. I did have some problems getting the screws out, especially in the top part, and I actually had to switch screwdrivers halfway through because some of the screws just didn't want to unscrew. Not exactly sure what was going on there, but once you have all of them unscrewed, all that you have to do is pry the bottom part off. When you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure you're being careful though, because in the bottom part there is a wire connecting everything together. All that you have to do is make sure that you lay it flat and then disconnect the wire like I'm doing right here. Once you pop out the wire, you can safely remove the bottom of the keyboard. You can see here it has some foam, and it also has the gasket mounts. You can safely set this off to the side now for later. Next up, we have the case foam. This helps the pinginess of the case, especially because it's a full aluminum build. You can also just safely set this off to the side as we don't need it right now. Now we can see the underside of the PCB, but before we get to this, we should probably go back to the front and do a few things, so let's do that. Flipping back to the front, the first thing you're going to want to do is just pop off this knob. All that you have to do is pull up on it and it should pop off really easily. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove this front aluminum plate. All that you have to do is lift up and it should come off, and then you can set that off to the side for later. After all of that, we're left with this piece of PCB, foam, and front plate sandwiched together, and we have to disassemble all of this too. And if you're going to guess, yes, it's all held by screws, so we have to get to unscrewing. To start disassembling this part, all that you're going to do is flip it to the front and locate the two screws that are on the front plate. Then you just have to start unscrewing. These two screws are actually standoff screws, and once we're done with these, we can go ahead and just stash these off to the side, because when rebuilding this keyboard, we're not going to be using them. We'll talk more about that later. Next up, we can flip the keyboard, and it leaves you a nice little parting gift of some standoffs, which we can also put away. Now that we have all that done, it's time to start on the back, which has a significant amount of more screws, so let's get started on that. Looking at it, we have a total of 8 screws on the top and bottom and 4 screws on the sides. While we're unscrewing these, I think it's a good time to mention that if you want to support me and you're buying keyboard parts right now, go ahead and check out the affiliate links in my description or on my website. Using these links helps me out and it gets you a little discount most of the time, so make sure to check them out. Also, make sure to check out my other social media, which is all linked in my website or in the description below. Now that you have everything unscrewed, you'll probably first notice these 2 plastic pieces that fall out between the PCB and the plate. These are the 2 acrylic diffusers for the side RGB on the keyboard, so you can just set these off to the side for now. Then you can finally pull everything apart and it should pull off nicely. The foam is kind of attached to the front plate, so make sure to watch out for that. Now that you have everything disassembled, you finally have the PCB by itself, and you can see that here. Then you'll also have this plate and the foam beneath it, which you can also set to the side for now. Now it's time to work on the stabilizers, which are on the PCB. These are screw-in stabilizers, so they're all screwed into the PCB itself, so that means we have to do some more unscrewing, unfortunately. I don't want to bore you guys with that, so let's speed that up. All that you have to know is unscrew them and you can pull them right out, and it's as easy as that. Flipping it over, you'll see that we have a perfectly clean PCB with absolutely nothing on the front. And now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and install the stabilizer foam that I've gotten from KBD Fans. This is essentially our start to rebuilding the GMMK Pro, so let's get started with the stabilizer foam. What I've been able to gather from reading about these online is that they help dampen the sound of the stabilizer hitting the PCB because they are sandwiched in between the PCB and the stabilizer. They're essentially little stickers and they replace band-aid modding. To get these installed, all that you have to do is peel them off from the little pad that they're on and then go ahead and stick them right where underneath the stabilizer would be. Make sure you line up the holes too so that you don't have a problem fitting the stabilizers in the hole later. Also, make sure to wipe off any lube that's on the PCB because I had problems with them sticking when I didn't. After installing them, your PCB should look a little something like this, and then we're ready to install the stabilizers. Like I mentioned, I modded these stabilizers myself, and I covered this in my RK61 video, which has a nice basic guide. If you want to check that out, it's up in the top right. To simply install them, all that you have to do is clip them in into the top hole, and then you want to mount them in the bottom hole. Typically, the clip-in part has a smaller hole, and that's what you want to look for. The other hole is for, you guessed it, some more screws. You're also going to be using a washer in this area, so go ahead and make sure you have some of those. Just screw these into the bottom while they're still clipped into the top, and then you should be all good to go. And then you finally installed your first stabilizers. Now you just have to do the rest of them. We're going to go ahead and speed through this part too because I'm sure you guys have had enough screwing today. I'm so sorry. But this is a relatively easy and painless process, so you should get it done pretty quickly. Once you have it all done, we're finally done with the stabilizers, and this is how it should look like. Before we move on to the next part of assembly, we're going to want to test out our stabilizers. This is typically smart, especially for screw-in stabilizers, because you'd have to disassemble almost the whole board to redo them. Now that we've went ahead and confirmed that our stabilizers sound good enough for us, we can go ahead and install the front plate and foam. Now, like I said earlier, don't install these standoff screws. This is because it's going to give this keyboard more flexibility and more bounce. One of the main problems with this keyboard, despite being gasket mounted, is that it's pretty stiff. Then we can go ahead and grab the foam that we removed earlier and put it back on the PCB. You're going to want to make sure that you line it up as best as you can because once you put the front plate back on, it's literally sandwiched in between the PCB and the plate. The first thing we're going to want to do to set up the plate for installation is grab these acrylic diffusers that we removed earlier and reinstall them onto the plate. All that you have to do that is line it up with the little pegs on the plate and click them in. When you're installing these, you're going to want to make sure that they're facing the right way though. You're going to want the clear side facing down toward the PCB so the RGB can shine through. Go ahead and flip the plate over and line it up onto the PCB and foam as best as you can. Once you get it lined up, you're going to want to push down on the plate as hard as possible, but make sure you're not pushing down too hard. Make sure you apply even pressure throughout the whole plate too. You're going to want this whole thing as level as possible because if it's not level and you go to install switches later, they aren't going to clip into the plate and they're just going to fall out really easily. An important thing to mention is that if you're using the polycarbonate plate, make sure to use the screws that are included with the plate because they're a special type of screw that you need for the polycarbonate plate. So go ahead and start screwing all those screws in. You're going to want to make sure that things are nice and even and you don't want to screw these too tight either. Also, don't be like me and put the front plate on before screwing these in. I was really dumb trying to do that. But once you do finally get all the screws installed into the PCB, you can go ahead and flip it over and install the front plate. You can set this somewhere safe face down and it won't go anywhere because we're going to be needing the bottom plate first. Go ahead and set the bottom plate on your workspace, and you're just going to want it on a nice flat surface. Then you're going to want to take the top part that we just had, and you're going to want to nicely and gently set it on top of the bottom case and then plug the wire in. Then you can just go ahead and set the top case onto the bottom case very gently. Once it's all secure, you can flip the case over and it's time to put the final screws in. One thing to note when putting the final screws in is don't tighten these too much. If you do, it's going to be really stiff, and that's something we want to avoid. I mean, unless you like stiff boards, but I don't know, that's kind of weird. I actually forgot to record the part of me screwing in the case, but this is what it looks like complete. Now that we've got all that done, it's time to put in the keycaps and switches. Since I'm sure all of you know how to put in switches, and we've gone through the assembly process for a little bit of time, we're going to go ahead and just use some video editing magic to get these switches and keycaps in. You might also notice that my top row isn't print switches, and that's kind of because I ran out of them. I didn't realize that I only ordered 70, and this keyboard uses a lot more than 70. Getting the last of the keycaps on, we can officially call this build done, and honestly I'm really happy with how it looks, so let's see how it sounds. Now that we've gone ahead and gone over my build and listened to it, it's time to talk about my final thoughts and the experience I had building. Honestly, I think building in this board was relatively simple and it's going to be great for beginners. The only real trouble I had personally myself was that some of the screws were a bit too tight when they came in, and that might have just been a quality control issue. It's also worth mentioning that the stabilizers that it comes with aren't the best, honestly. I did try modding them myself and lubing them, but I honestly just couldn't get them sounding how I wanted them to sound, so I ended up throwing my Durock V2s in them. Other than that though, a kit that has a full aluminum body, a rotary knob, and the size that it is, I think it is a great beginner board. Moving on to a few other things that aren't exactly related to building the keyboard itself though, there are a few issues that I'd like to talk about. And the first thing that I'm going to be talking about is the gasket mounting system on this keyboard. Now, I will say that I am by no means a professional when it comes to knowledge on gasket mounting keyboards, but I have watched a lot of other keyboard content creators and their thoughts on the gasket mounting system for the GMMK Pro. And from what I've gathered, it's not really gasket mounted. It's more bottom screw. Since the case screws in from the bottom, it's a lot more stiffer, and even though there are gasket mounts in the keyboard, it really doesn't have the bounce that a typical gasket mounted board would. Now, of course, there are modifications that you can do to get more bounce in the keyboard, and we gone over a few of those things in the build earlier. But the thing is I don't really want that in a beginner keyboard. It should be a gasket mounted keyboard, and that is definitely a problem, and I think it's more of a gimmick that Glorious is trying to sell. One last thing that I want to mention is that currently you might receive a board that's not QMK compatible, which might be a big deal for some people. There's a current chip shortage, and they're saying that they're looking into upgrading them when they can, but they don't have an ETA for that. So look out for that if you want it. So would I recommend this board to a beginner, and would I buy it again? I'd have to say absolutely yes. For the price at $170 and a full aluminum body, it's just a really quality keyboard in general. Despite some of the few flaws it has, I think it's a really great budget beginner keyboard, and I think it's going to help a lot of people step foot into the mechanical keyboard community. Another good thing is that if you're interested in buying this keyboard, it has been in reservation, but it is going to be launching July 6th, which is coming up real quickly. I'm going to go ahead and leave the link down in the description below for the GMMK Pro. It won't be available when this video is posted, but on July 6th, you should be able to buy it there. I think that'll be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and give this video a like and comment. I hope you all have a wonderful day. See ya.